Do you have any idea what eclairs, napoleons, cream puffs, cakes, tarts have in common? Well, it's pastry cream, that delicious, creamy filling that really adds a lot of delicacy and beauty to any one of those particular baked goods. Today we're going to show you how to make a very simple pastry cream that's just as good as the more difficult pastry cream that you've learned. And we're going to make a cherry tart, a coffee-filled cream puff, and a Kremowka. Wait till you see that dessert. And visiting with me today are 3 students from the Cambridge School of Culinary Arts, where they are learning pastry making in a 1-year course, right? And your name is?
I'm Megan.
And welcome.
Thank you.
Casey.
Casey?
Eliana.
Well, welcome, and I hope you can interrupt, and you can correct, and you can add to anything I say, and please feel free to do so, okay? The first thing that we're going to do today is make the pastry cream. And probably you've all been introduced to the recipe, the traditional way of making pastry cream, which is to temper the eggs and the milk, and then add your other ingredients, and then add your butter last as an enrichment. This is a much simpler method. And so the first thing we do is put everything in a pot. Use a heavy bottom saucepan. Non-reactive metal is best. A half a cup of sugar, granulated sugar. A 1/4 cup of cornstarch. This is our thickener. A pinch of salt. I like salt, so And now 2 cups of whole milk and 4 large egg yolks.
So what's the advantage of adding your yolks here, just so that you can whisk them into the milk?
We're just measuring the milk anyway, so we might as well just put it in here. I'm trying to use as few utensils as possible. And also add your butter, 2 tablespoons of butter. And that will melt, so bring this to a boil. And you don't have to worry, the eggs will not curdle. Okay, this looks very lovely. And how long did that take?
2 minutes.
Not long.
Definitely a big time saver.
So now we're going to put this through a sieve. Now, pastry cream can be left just like this, but then you can also flavor it with liqueurs. You can also add coffee. You can also add melted chocolate to this. It's quite a versatile cream. So isn't that beautiful? And 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Best quality, of course. Stir that in. And one of my favorite flavorings for cherry tart, and that's what we're making today, Bing cherry tart, is cherry liqueur, so 4 teaspoons.
And no liquid is gonna thin out the pastry cream?
Well, if you added a
Too
cup.
much? Yeah.
But then you wouldn't be able to even know that it's thin because you'd be so drunk. So that is it. So put a plastic wrap over and put that right in the refrigerator. Now I'm going to show you how to make cherry tart filled with that wonderful pastry cream. Pâte brisée, which is my basic pie crust, has no eggs and very little sugar. And the pâte sucrée has 2 egg yolks, and the pâte sucrée extra has an extra egg yolk. So that's what we're making. 2½ cups of all-purpose flour, unbleached, a pinch of salt, 1/3 cup of sugar. And I'm going to just pulse this a little bit. It's the same thing as sifting it. Using a food processor it makes this really, really easy. We have timed making it by hand and making it in a food processor, and I think it takes 16 or 18 seconds in a food processor, and it takes a lot longer by hand.
Yeah.
Maybe the butter is icy cold, 2 sticks cut up into beautiful cubes. Really helps very much in the cutting in process. I still want to have little tiny bits of butter visible. And then we have 3 large egg yolks and a 1/4 cup of ice water. Beat this up a little bit.
Do you use sucré instead of brisée just for flavor? Is the texture
Well,
preferred?
it's a little sturdier and tasty because it's sweet and pretty. It keeps its shape very nicely. And you can just pour this.
Now, can this be done ahead of time?
Oh yeah, you can keep it refrigerated overnight. Don't keep it too much longer. You know how pastry starts to get gray?
Yeah.
So, but look at the great color. And put this on a little bit of bench flour. You have to have enough moisture. You have to make sure it's not too dry. If it's too dry, you're going to have a really hard time rolling it out. Just divide this in half because this will make 2 9-inch tarts. And wrap this in plastic wrap, a nice flat round. So these will go into the fridge. And we have one all ready to roll. We have a 9-inch tart shell. We want it to be larger than the pan. Now, how do you get the dough from here to there?
Roll it onto your rolling pin.
Good. And watch what you're doing. See, it went in very nicely. And then with the backs of your fingers, you can press into the pan. I like to reinforce the sides, and that reinforcing means doubling down a little bit. I push this down a little bit like that, all the way around. Now you can get the excess off, press this down like that, and use your rolling pin to just break it off. And that works very well. It gives you a very nice crust. Chill this for about 20 minutes before you bake it. So we have our chilled shell, looks good. You don't have to dock it because it's a dense dough. The egg yolks keep it nice and flat. We're going to blind bake. And a piece of parchment paper looks like I'm getting ready to throw it away or throw it at somebody. But just wrinkle that up. It makes it more malleable and it'll fit nicer into the shell. Have your oven preheated to 375 and add your weights. These are all kinds of different beans and lentils, split peas, and they make a very nice weight. So this goes right into the oven for about 20 minutes. Remove the weights and the paper and bake until it's a nice golden brown. Here's our finished tart shell, nice crispy brown crust, and it's ready to fill. You have to pit the cherries. That's the time-consuming thing to do. So best to try to find a cherry pitter. The best one, I think, is this German version. And the pits fall into this container here. But don't you love that? This goes like fast, really great. Now this you can find in odd little hardware stores. You put the cherry right here and you just push this down and the pit goes into the jar and the cherry is pitted. And then there's this one. I just want to show you all these versions because they're kind of interesting. This one you put the cherry here and you push down and the pit comes out and your cherry is done. So whatever way you choose to do it, 3½ cups of cherries. So cut these in half and add them to your 3½ cups. And now we're going to whisk the cream until it's nice and smooth. This is chilled. And add a ½ cup of heavy cream whipped. This will lighten it slightly, enrich it slightly, and add a little bit of flavor. And I'm mixing that in. And now put this pastry cream right into your shell. Now you could chill this again if you'd like, but I'm going to put the cherries right on top. We're putting the cherries cut side up all the way around. And the stem end out or in, whichever way, but once you start, try to be uniform for the prettiest tart. So here, last cherry. And I have cherry jam that's been strained, and add a little Kirschwasser. And then dress your tart. Once you do this final little embellishment, put the tart in the refrigerator, let it chill before unmolding, cutting, and serving. So now we're going to make the pastry cream again, but this time with espresso coffee to make pâte choux puffs. So 1/4 cup of cornstarch, a ½ cup of sugar, a large pinch of salt, 4 egg yolks right into our milk, 1½ cups of whole milk. And the reason I'm doing that is just to break up the egg yolks. And have a ½ cup of espresso ready to incorporate into your pastry cream. Okay, so that's ready to go into this mix. Oh, I missed an egg yolk. Stir this up and add your butter, 2 tablespoons of butter. And one last ingredient, ½ cup of espresso. One of the most popular features of my kitchen is the espresso machine, cappuccino machine. And I put that in, and I was so happy I did. So boil it for 1 minute, very different color from the original vanilla cream we made for the cherry tart. Strain this. Smells so good. Now, what do you say? Do you think you'll go back to the old method of pastry cream?
No, it seems a lot faster.
It's very fast. Oh yeah, see, this one has a little bit more of the albumin of the egg, a little egg white here, so it's good we strained it. Now, a teaspoon of vanilla. After years of making these things, you can sort of guesstimate certain things, like a teaspoon of vanilla. But for the inexperienced, it's really a good thing to measure. And cover this. You don't want that skin to form. And chill. So now for the puffs themselves, the pâte à choux puffs. It's an easy dough. You've all made cream puffs, éclair, and it's cooked dough. So you start in a pan with 1 stick of butter, melted in 1 cup of water, with a teaspoon of sugar and a half a teaspoon of salt. So bring this to a boil so you can melt the butter. When I was a caterer, I would have 6 pans on the stove making 6 big batches of pâte à choux to make cream puffs for croquembouches, because at Christmas time, everybody wanted a croquembouche. So bring that to a boil.
Do you ever make your dough in the stand mixer or?
I usually use the food processor if I'm going to make lots of it, because it takes a while to beat each egg in. And a food processor is so fast, but you can use a stand mixer too, and you can make a double batch in there.
Yeah.
This is a single batch. I find that if you're making it in quantity at home, a single batch at a time is best. And now I'm going to just add 1 cup of flour, all-purpose unbleached flour, and stir and cook at the same time. You can see there's a nice film all in the bottom. That means the flour is almost cooked. Remove from the heat. I like to let it cool slightly before I start incorporating the eggs. I just don't want to cook the eggs in the hot pot. So I've already broken my eggs, and you can add 1 egg at a time. And stir. And this dough miraculously absorbs the egg. As it absorbs, you can then add another egg. And with each additional egg, it takes a little bit longer for the egg to be incorporated. You see how it breaks up into these little globs, but then it all comes back together again. Well, here we have our big blob of pâte à choux paste, and now we can fit it into a large pastry bag, and we're going to pipe out our cream puffs to be. We're using a 3/4 inch plain round tip for this. And if you're making lots of cream puffs, you can start in on your next batch of pâte à choux at this point. We've traced 2-inch rounds on the other side of our parchment paper, and you can fit about 8 puffs on each baking sheet. Now grab this. And there's a little secret. The paper might blow a little bit in a convection oven. So put a tiny dab of your pâte à choux right under the corner. That holds it down during baking. You could also use a weight, like a big metal bolt or something. Somebody suggested yesterday a fork or a knife from your drawer, but if it has a plastic handle, forget it. Or if it's silver, forget it. Do not put that into the hot oven. So we are going to be baking these in a preheated oven, 400 degrees in a conventional oven, and 375 in a convection oven.
You left a lot of space in between them. Are they going to get a lot bigger?
These do grow. These are going to be nice, large puffs. And you don't want them to grow into each other. And any irregularities can be erased with a wet finger. Very nice. And a little water like that will just get rid of those little nubbins on top, or irregularities. Now at this point, if you were going to do these as unglazed or uniced cream puffs, you would use an egg glaze. Egg yolk with water, an egg yolk with cream, egg with water, and you would lightly brush the surface. But since these are going to be dipped in a lovely chocolate, you don't have to do that.
Is an egg glaze just for shine and color?
Yeah, for looks, basically, yeah. Okay, into your 400-degree oven, set your timer. So these are our puffs. It's a good idea when these come out of the oven to make a little X with the point of a knife right in the bottom. You can fill the puffs through this little X, and it also serves to let the steam out of the puff while it's cooling. You could also just make a little mark right in the side like that, which serves the same purpose, whichever way you choose. To make the chocolate topping, you need a half a cup of hot, heavy cream poured over 4 ounces of the best semi-sweet chocolate you can find. Just let this hot cream sit on the chocolate. It will melt it, and then you can whisk it into a nice, smooth, shiny glaze. And here in this pastry bag, fitted with a filler tip. This is a number 230, and it works very well, filling things like éclairs, cream puffs, and you want it to be generous, but you don't want it popping out all over the place. So our puffs are filled. To be extra neat, good idea to slide a piece of parchment paper or a baking sheet underneath your puffs. Excess glaze will just drip right down. And just dip. Doesn't that look great? Oh, so beautiful. Just like the best French bakery. Gonna make these?
Oh yeah.
That's great.
Let them set and then devour. Enjoy. This recipe, Kremowka, is pastry cream lightened with the addition of butter between 2 crispy, sugary layers of puff pastry. I'm using store-bought puff pastry. If you have a good supplier of pâte feuilletée, get yourself some nice big sheets like this. Supermarket versions are not anywhere near as good as the professional version of puff pastry. So beg or borrow from your local bakery if you can. And it's a great thing if you're thinking of opening a pastry shop to be able to provide sheets of puff to your customers too, because people do like to bake things at home. Yeah. But you can also make this particular dessert, which is called a Kremowka, a Polish dessert. Have you ever tasted a Kremowka?
No, but it looks.
You're going to love it. Now I'm going to cut this sheet in half and roll each piece into a rectangle that measures 13 by 9, but just square it off a little bit. Now work quickly if it's out of the refrigerator because you do not want this to get warm. Puff pastry is fragile in the heat. And I'm just rolling it up like this to get it onto our silicone-lined baking sheet. It works best on a silicone sheet like this. Now, puff rises to about that high. To keep it from rising unevenly, here's a technique that I think you will enjoy. Put a baking rack right on top of the pan like that. This will keep the puff rising evenly. So right into a 400-degree oven. Set your timer for 35 minutes. So now we're going to make the mousseline filling for the Kremowka. So it's 3/4 of a cup of sugar, 6 tablespoons of cornstarch, a pinch and a half of salt, and 6 large egg yolks. And I'm mixing that into 3 cups of whole milk. It's nice to beat the yolks with the milk first, just to break them up. Pour that into your dry ingredients. Stir to mix and add 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter. So now put this right on the heat, bring it to a boil, and cook for 1 minute. Okay, this has cooked for 1 minute. Put this through a fine sieve. You can just stir in your vanilla while it's still warm. And so the Kremowka has just vanilla as the flavoring, no other embellishments except for the butter. But this has to cool before you incorporate the butter into it. And cover with plastic wrap right down on the surface so it doesn't develop any skin and chill until ready to incorporate the butter. And you're going to use the stand mixer to do that. So to make the mousseline, put 3 sticks, 3/4 of a pound of butter, unsalted butter, into the bowl of your mixer. Room temperature is best because you want it really, really soft without being melted. And mix that until it is fluffy. And while that's getting nice and fluffy, just add the seeds of 1 plump vanilla bean. You just strip the seeds out. Oh, look how much. Isn't that great? So this is going to go into your mousseline. And just put that in there. And we add the chilled pastry cream a little bit at a time. It's almost gelatinous. It's funny how that seizes up like that. But that's what keeps its shape in a tart, so that you can cut a nice wedge of a tart. So rich. And it looks like you've incorporated whipped cream when, in fact, you're incorporating butter. So now this is our puff. Oh, it's like a feather bed. Isn't that pretty?
Yeah.
And this will be the lower layer. And spread your mousseline evenly over the entire thing. Don't laugh. This is really good. What'd you taste?
The cooling rack made a nice pattern.
I did, didn't it? It really works wonderfully. And it does collapse a little bit under the weight of this extra light cream that we're putting in here. Now you could, if you were making Napoleons, you could just do raspberries and whipped cream as a filling. But this is a real, authentic Polish festive cake. And I actually have really only seen this in a couple Polish bakeries in the United States. In one bakery in Chicago, and in a bakery where I was in the town I was growing up in Nutley, and also once in Buffalo. Nutley didn't have a large Polish population, but except for the Kostyra family, my family.
Now, is this a dessert you grew up eating?
No. My mother preferred more yeast desserts like babkas and that kind of thing. And fruit tarts. She was very good at making fruit tarts. Doesn't that look good? Now this goes right on top of that. So now we're going to refrigerate this just as is for about an hour up to 8 hours. So this is the chilled Kremowka. Sprinkle lightly with confectioner's sugar. I like the waffle pattern on the top of the cake. It's very pretty. And then using your serrated knife, just cut it into appropriate size squares. Is that big enough for you guys? That size? I love the crunchiness. And then we'll cut these into squares. Very similar to a Napoleon. And it's delicious. Please try. Let me know what you think. It's right before lunch when we're serving this, so if you don't eat it all now, you can finish it later. So you can see how versatile pastry cream really can be. I hope you keep this recipe in your recipe collection and use it often.
Wow.
Enjoy. How's it taste?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Martha Bakes. Isn't it good?
Oh, yeah.
And that
Very
with the
flaky.
Begin with a triangle, roll into a cone shape, and tighten to form a point. Secure with a piece of tape. Fold remaining parchment into the cone and tear a small notch. Folding the parchment in the opposite direction will further secure it. Fill the cone with chocolate and fold over the top to seal. Snip the tip of the cone. Now you're ready to begin writing.